Do you remember growing up with King Pimp, Miss Sexy, and her dog Hotbox? I sure as hell do. Okay, now I know that introduction was really confusing, but hear me out. Every moment in a game, I would change a character's name to something funny, just to make it more interesting. Now, as you can see, Final Fantasy VIII was when I was younger, and obviously didn't swear enough, but the point is, I had stupid, more innocent names, but they stuck with me, obviously, if I can remember King Pimp, Miss Sexy, and Hotbox. And even now, when I'm older, I can still name characters in older games, and still laugh so much. Nowadays, you can't name people in games because, well, they have voices. I mean, voices are good at fleshing out characters and, like, giving them their own feel, but it doesn't feel like your character. It weirded me out when I heard real voice acting for the first time in Valkyrie Profile, especially when a lot of the cast was in Pokemon and I was watching that at the same time, so I was like, what the fuck is Jessie and Misty and fucking Ash? To me, giving names to characters puts a huge personal touch to the game, because it's your names, or your friends' names, or whatever stupid, ridiculous name you could think of, but through it you create something personal and funny to remember. Like, Squall will always be King Pimp for me. And Angelo, I actually had to look up his name because I always thought of him as Hotbox. And I think in all of my records I named him Hotbox for some reason. I don't even know what Hotbox is. It's just a hot box, man. And you go back to these names and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? Or, oh shit, I'm not friends with those people anymore. Or, oh shit, I had no imagination. It's kind of like recorded history, going back to games and see what you were interested in most. There's a game called Uniracers for the Super Nintendo, and at one point I think I logged in just to play a little bit of the game, and I found out that all of them were named after RPG characters, save for two, which were Yoshi and Toad, because Yoshi and Toad are the best characters in Mario ever. Of course, voice acting is the norm now, and it's kind of impossible to personally name characters unless they secretly, sneakily get around it. Kind of like Mass Effect, where they just use your last name as Shepard. Shepard! And you can have whatever name you want, but it's more for the save file reasons instead of actual personal touch to it. Even games with no voices are set on names. So the whole naming aspect's kind of been reduced a lot. And, like, I really miss that kind of aspect because you remember games and moments in games that are just perfect. I remember one time in Final Fantasy VII where, you know, when you get kidnapped in that, like, brothel place in the slums and you have to dress up as a girl, we named Ares or Aerith or however you want to call her, we call her Miss Vodka. And then when Tifa introduces herself, she goes, oh hello Miss Vodka, and it's just like, no, you fucking idiot, it's just Miss Vodka, you fucking idiot. So, like, I remember these moments, and they're ages ago, like, so long ago, but it just makes the game more memorable. I mean, if, like, technology keeps advancing with video games, and they somehow make it that you can input names and they'll say it in the game, that'd be amazing, but I really don't think it's all the effort. Like, I really don't think we're ever gonna have any games anymore where you can name your character because everything's already set. And, like, I don't know, that's kind of disappointing. And I mean, like, I understand why it's kind of fading out because everyone has voices and stuff, but I miss it. I really do, because, like, how else am I gonna name a character Barf and, like, have them say, oh, call me Barf? I guess it's like a childhood thing now, but I still miss it. It would be fun to name characters nowadays. So what's your opinion on it? Do you miss naming your characters, or do you like having names already set? Also, why don't you just share some of the names that you called your characters? Some funny stories that you have, and put it in the comments. Now onto the comments from the last video. Are horror games losing their scariness? Faish54 says that the only horror game they played was The Walking Dead, which can be tense, and then the atmosphere is very tense because you have to either button mash or select the right thing, which can be a kind of scare in its own way. And for the question of what games scared me the most, Amnesia was pretty tense when I was playing it, but Fear 1, because you didn't know what to expect. It was like the new game in the genre, and it was just fucking weird because it has all this psychological stuff about it. So that was really weird. As for atmosphere, Silent Hill games are pretty scary for me. Like, they're not, like, scary, it just makes me feel uneasy and uncomfortable. Omega Metroid says that they are a huge sucker for old school horror and Japanese horror, kind of like the Fatal Frame games, which are just outright creepy. They also mentioned that horror games are just a bunch of jump scares, and they don't really have anything clever about them or any psychology in it at all. They also want to see some more old school type horror games, like the Resident Evil with the fixed camera angles and everything. And yes, the remake was great. I replayed that so many times, and my friends and I just, oh, we love it. But I would also love to see more games like that, and I would buy them in an instant. Miles Tig says that Resident Evil 4 was scary with the regenerators, and the, I think they're called Iron Maidens as well, the one that have, like, pricklies and everything. Yes, they were really scary, especially the first time you encounter them, you shoot their legs out, oh, I'm gonna shoot them in the head now. But no, they jump at you and bite you, and then they start regrowing their limbs. Holy shit! What the fuck? Non-jump scare games, Fatal Frame, Ju-On, The Grudge, are very good ideas for those kind of games, and also Amnesia. They say that a big problem in games is the atmosphere and not setting it up properly. And yeah, video games don't really set them up too well. So if they improved on that, then the horror game would be worthwhile. Piratic Wars says that the golden era of horror games was PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube, where a ton of horror games came out, and what with the graphical upgrade, it was a bit better. But now games are about spectacle and pretending to be scary. They mentioned that they love Dead Island and State of Decay, which is a great game, because they're true open-world zombie games, and they're not just scary, they're tense. Dead Space and Amnesia are just dark and full of jump scares and QuickTime events. Yeah, I'd say definitely Dead Space. Amnesia, not too much, but it is really dark. I had to crank up the brightness for it so I could actually see. Ilrian Devil had a very long comment, so I had to cut a bit of it. But the main thing is, horror is subjective, and that is very, very true. It all depends on the personality of the person playing the game. They also agree that jump scares are taking over games, and they're not scary, especially when one pops off after the other. They mentioned that they either want a good story or they want a good scare, so they have to pick one and not both because they seem to conflict with one another, which I agree with. Certain games have better stories, but then not so scary, and then there's some games that are scary, but the story is non-existent or broken as shit. They mentioned that they would love a game to be played by the perspective of the killer or rapist or whatever, kind of like Walter White from Breaking Bad, where you know they're not great, but you can relate to them and understand why they're doing it, and then maybe feel bad and shameful by agreeing that what they're doing is okay. So yeah, thanks for the comments, and I will be replying to the new comments in the next episode.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!